Hello, welcome to this new tutorial. In this tutorial, we shall talk about Right to Freedom, Article 19. Well, Article 19 guarantees to all citizens the following important 6 rights. Point number 1, right to freedom of speech and expression. Second, right to assemble peaceably and without arms. Third, right to form associations or unions or cooperative societies. Fourth, right to move freely throughout the territory of India. 5. Right to reside and settled in any part of the territory of India. And last, right to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or businesses. So, these rights are available only to the citizens and to a shareholder of a company, but not to foreigners or legal persons like companies or corporation, etc. These 6 rights are protected against only state action and not against private individuals. Let us begin with the first right under Article 19, that is freedom of speech and expression. Well, it implies that every citizen of India has the right to express his or her opinion or view, belief and conviction freely by word of mouth, writings, printing, picturing or in any other manner. So, under this right of freedom of speech and expression, it implies that every citizen has the right to express his or her own opinion, views, belief. Views can be expressed through word of mouth, writings, printings or by picturing or any other manner. So this is in short what freedom of speech and expression talks about under Article 19 as the first freedom under this article. Now, beside this, according to Supreme Court of India, freedom of speech and expression includes the following. These are right to propagate one's view as well as views of others, which means that every individual have to propagate his own views or opinions as well as the views of others. Next, freedom of press. It means very simple that press has all kind of a freedom when it comes to publishing any news or covering any item within the Indian Union. Next, freedom of commercial advertisement. Again, it's related to media, that every media house, every media channel has their own freedom when it comes to putting any advertisement related to commercial use. Next, right against tapping of telephone conversation. Every individual have a right to ask the court or a state or any other judiciary machinery or to fight in the court against anyone's tapping their telephone or their telephonic conversation. Right to telecast, that is basically government does not have a monopoly on electronic media, but every private partner also have a right to telecast news as well as other items. Next, right against bandh called by political parties or organization, which means that it is not compulsory for everybody to be a part of the bandh or a strike called by political party or organization. You as an individual can always act against it. It is your fundamental rights that if you want to be part of the bandh called by a political party or organization, you can. And if you are not interested to be a part of the political party or not interested to be a part of the bandh called by a political party, then you are free to choose your choice. Next, right to know about government activities, that every individual in fact in India has a right to know all the activities of the government. That is a freedom what you enjoy according to the Supreme Court. Next, freedom of silence, that you can remain silent. It is your choice. Nobody can force you to speak or to give any testimony against any individual or a group of an individual. so you can enjoy this freedom to remain silent. Next, right against imposition of pre-censorship as a newspaper, that state or any institution cannot impose any kind of a pre-censorship to newspaper. Basically, newspaper has a freedom to cover any news or publish the news. State cannot impose any imposition on the news item. And next, right to demonstrate or picketing, but not right to strike. All the individuals have a right to demonstrate against the injustice or against the certain action of the state, but it does not mean that you have a right to strike. So you do not have a right to strike, but yes, you have a right to demonstrate your grievances only in peaceful manners without taking any arms in the hand. So this was the first freedom under Article 19, which talks about freedom of speech and expression. Now let us move to a second freedom, which is freedom of assembly. Well, every citizen has the right to assemble peacefully and without arms. That means every citizen under this right to freedom of speech and expression have a right to assemble peacefully without taking any arms in their hand. Well, it includes the right to hold public meeting, demonstration, and to take out procession. That means under this freedom of assembly, you can hold various public meetings, you can call for a demonstration, which is again peacefully without any arms, as well as you can call out for a procession without disturbing the society or without disturbing other individuals. Moving on, this freedom can be exercised only on public land, and the assembly must be peacefully and unarmed. That means whenever you call for a public meeting, whenever you call for a demonstration or a procession, this must be carried out only on the public land, the land owned by a public or a community, and not on a private land or private compound. And again, this right to freedom of assembly has to be carried out peacefully without having any arms in the hand. Well, this provision does not protect violence, disorderly riots, assemblies, or one that cause breach of public peace or one that involves arms. That means this freedom of assembly does not provide any protection for any sort of a violence or any sort of a riots or anything which leads to the cause of a breach of a public peace or which creates law and order. Therefore, under freedom of assembly, it does not protect any violent activity, riots, or which leads to a law and order problem. So therefore, these rights does not include the right to strike. So this is all about the freedom of assembly under Article 19. Now here we have some restrictions. So here state can impose reasonable restriction on the exercise of rights of assembly on two grounds, namely sovereignty and integrity of the India and public order, including maintenance of traffic in the area concerned. That means when individual or when citizens enjoy the freedom of assembly, there is a catch here, and that catch is basically restriction, that state can restrict an individual or can stop individual when it comes to the freedom of assembly only on two priorities or two reasons. One is sovereignty and integrity of India. That means if there is a threat to India's sovereignty or the integrity of India, then the state will not going to allow you to have any sort of a freedom of assembly. And second, if there is a law and order problem or a public law and order, including basically maintenance of traffic in that particular area, then state will not allow you to conduct a demonstration, meetings, or procession. So this is the only two reason for state to impose any kind of a restriction. In fact, moving on, under section 141 of the Indian Penal Code, as assembly of 5 or more person become lawful if the object is. What does it mean is that under section 141 of the Indian Penal Code, the assembly of a 5 or more person can be called or can become unlawful object or unlawful activity on following grounds. First, to resist the execution of any law or a legal process, to forcibly occupy the property of some person, to commit any mischief or a criminal trespasses, to force some person to do an illegal act, and last, to threaten the government or its official on exercising lawful person. So, under section 141 of Indian Penal Code, your right to assembly can be controlled, or right to assembly can become unlawful objection or unlawful activity if you found resisting the execution of any law or a legal process, if an individual forcefully occupy the property of one person, or commit any mischief or criminal trespasses, or sometimes some people have been forced to do illegal act, or if you threaten the government or its official on exercising the lawful power. So these are the certain restrictions which can be put up or which can be placed in society, which can lead to the suppression of freedom of assembly only on two grounds. One is for the sovereignty and integrity of India, second is public order, and another exception is section 141 of the Indian Penal Code. So this is all about freedom of assembly and its restriction. Moving on to the third point, or third kind of a freedom of association. Well, all citizens have the right to form association or union or cooperative society. It's very simple that under Article 19, right to freedom, you have also a freedom to form any kind of an association, all kind of unions, as well as cooperative societies. Well, it includes the right to form political parties, companies, partnership firm, societies, clubs, organizations, trade union, or any body of person. So you have immense freedom under the Article 19, freedom of association, that you can form any kind of association, as is rightly been pointed out, that you can form political parties, you can form companies, you can form partnership associations or partnership firms, you can form societies, you can form n number of clubs, you can form organization of various kinds, you can form trade union, as well as any body of a person. Now again, here there is one restriction, and this restriction is basically a reasonable restriction can be imposed on the exercise of this right by the state, again on two grounds. One is sovereignty and integrity of India, and second one is public order and morality. Now one thing we need to understand when it comes to this restriction, that yes, all individuals have a right to form all kind of association, but the association should not harm the sovereignty and integrity of this country. If any association, political party, clubs or societies harms or create a problem or disturbance for the integrity of India or the sovereignty of India, then this association would be banned. Similarly, if any association creates a public order or law and order problems or violates any morality, then such association would be closed down. So this is all about freedom of association. Now let us move to a next freedom under Article 19, that is freedom of movement. Well, this freedom entitles that every citizens to move freely throughout the territory of India. That means every Indian citizens across the length and breadth of this country have this freedom of movement, that you can travel throughout the territory of India or throughout the territory of the country without any problem. Here, he or she can move freely from one state to another or from one place to another within the state. And these rights underline the idea that India is a one unit so far as the citizens are concerned. Well, again, when it comes to freedom of movement, there is a restriction. The grounds of imposing reasonable restriction on these freedoms are two reasons, namely point number 1 or reason number 1, the interest of general public, and second, the protection of interest of any scheduled tribes. Now these are the two reasons wherein the freedom of movement can be suppressed or can be halted. And the first reason, because of the interest of the general public. Okay, example, if there is a situational problem in one part of the territory or one part of the state, then there are possibilities that the movement of any personality, especially from a law and order perspective, any political personality, if he or she enters into that particular area, then sometime it leads to create a problem for a law and order, which eventually leads to the problem of general public. So therefore the restriction of that individual is very important, so that it should not lead to another problem or escalation of that problem in that particular area. So that's the first reason why restriction can be imposed on the freedom of movement only in the interest of general public, so that law and order should not become a problem by the visit of any high profile personality, especially from political perspective. Similarly, when it comes to protection of interest of any scheduled tribes, then it becomes another issue to stop the freedom of movement. Example, we have different kinds of ethnic groups, we have different types of tribal groups who have their own system of governance within the Indian Union, and therefore we have some kind of an intrusion into their territory, and therefore to stop those intrusion into their territory and to protect those scheduled tribes, the freedom of movement can be stopped, or there can be a reasonable restriction for the freedom of movement, because the entry of an outsider in a tribal area is restricted to protect the distinctive culture, language, customs and manners of the scheduled tribes. So these are the two reasons why there can be a restriction on the freedom of movement. Moving on, the next freedom under the Article 19 is freedom of residence. Well, here under this freedom, every citizen has the right to reside and settle in any part of the territory of the country. It's very simple to understand that under this freedom of residence under Article 19 fundamental rights, every Indian citizen, wherever he may be living or wherever he may be staying, he has a full freedom of fundamental rights to settle down in any part of the territory of the country, from north south to east west, across the length and breadth of this country. When it comes to freedom of residence, here we have two parts. Part number 1, the right to reside in any part of the country, which means to stay at any place temporarily. Now under this first part, anybody can reside anywhere in the country on temporary basis. So that's the first part of freedom of residence. And second, the right to settle in any part of the country, which means to set up a home or domicile at any place permanently. So second part talks about that a person can reside and person can settle down permanently in any part of the state or country. So basically under freedom of residence, there are two parts wherein individual can settle or stay or reside at any part of the country on temporary basis, or he can settle down on a permanent basis. Well, moving forward, again we have here restriction. Now the state can impose reasonable restriction on the exercise of this right on two grounds, namely the first, the interest of the general public, and second, the protection of interest of any scheduled tribes. So again, the restriction comes only if there is a problem when it comes to the law and order by individual settlement or individual residence in a particular area, and therefore looking at the interest of the general public, state may impose some restriction on any individual when it comes to residing in a particular state or a country or a part of the state on a temporary basis or on permanent basis. And second, under the protection of interest of any scheduled tribes, it's all because the rights of outsider to reside and settle in tribal areas is restricted to protect the distinctive culture, language, custom and manners of scheduled tribes. And the last category of a freedom under the Article 19 is freedom of profession. Under this article and under this freedom, all individual and all citizens are given the right to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or businesses. That means under this freedom, any individual can choose what kind of a profession he wants or she wants to get into, their own choice of occupation, trade as well as business. So state will never going to interfere when it comes to the choice of profession by its citizens or a choice of the occupation or a trade or a business by its occupation. So that's all about freedom of profession. Moving on, the state here again can impose reasonable restriction on the exercise of this right in the interest of the general public. So state may interfere only if there is a possibility of maintaining the interest of the general public. Therefore, further, state is empowered to prescribe professional or a technical qualification necessary for practicing any profession. Now, only catch or clause here under the freedom of profession that state may and state can, and in fact state is empowered to prescribe necessary technical qualification for practicing technical profession. Example, if you want to be an engineer, then you must have a qualification, technical qualification of engineering. If you want to be a medical doctor, then you must have a medical certificate to enjoy and to join that profession. So these are the exceptions when it comes to technical qualification necessary for practicing a certain profession. So this is all about Article 19, and these are the 6 different freedom what and citizen of India enjoys under Article 19, right to freedom, and these are the 6 articles which has guaranteed to all the citizens of this India. So I hope you have understood Article 19 in detail. In next tutorial we shall talk about Article 20, that is protection in respect of conviction for offenses. Till then, take care.